Hi again, welcome to this episode. So far we built our website, we've integrated it with HTML, CSS and PHP. We wouldn't finish this tutorial if we don't mention JavaScript. So I think it makes sense if we bring in some JavaScript. Right from the beginning of this class, I intended to have all these languages integrated. But although I saw that it was getting longer, but I still think it is important to mention JavaScript. So the whole thing at this point is to help you to see clearly how these languages come together on the project, because you definitely have such opportunity. You have projects that might require you to combine all these elements. So it is more of showing you how to gather all these languages into the same project. So in this video, I would like us to go through some basics of JavaScript. So what is JavaScript? That's the first thing we need to answer. So JavaScript is a general purpose language, just like we said for PHP, but JavaScript is even more general purpose than even PHP, because today JavaScript can be used to not only to build websites, you can also use it to build desktop applications, mobile phone, even into robotics, right? It all goes all over the place, and it is one of the main reasons to insisted to make sure I've talked about JavaScript in this series. So JavaScript is a programming language just like PHP is, except how we write JavaScript is a bit different. So it is a programming language, and then JavaScript is also, depending on the environment where it is used or it is run, can look a little bit different or can behave a little bit different. So we'll come back on that matter. So the first thing we would like to do right here is to see how to link the linking of JavaScript with our HTML document. So it is very important, but before we move to that, as usual, we need to look at what JavaScript looks like. What is it like? So in general, JavaScript, to get it working, you have to insert a script tag in your HTML, just like we did with star, remember? So you write script again, so you close this script, and here you can write any JavaScript. So you can see that this looks like what we saw with CSS, which is you write star. Let me give this a different color. So you write star, and then you can now close the star tag. Sorry, not with else. So you can close with the star tag, and you can also look at it. You can also remember the PHP part. So if you look at the PHP code too, we kind of have this opening characters and then the closing ones. So there's this similarity throughout these languages. So wherever we have this, we have CSS. So I think for PHP, let me even use a different color. So let me use a different color for PHP, green. So nice question mark PHP, then nice question mark PHP. So we can have our echo here, and then hello. So we have the PHP like that. So the same thing here, we have CSS. So all I'm trying to underline here is the similarity in how we get these languages into our HTML. So the same thing goes with JavaScript. Once you write the script and so on, it is fine. You can write your JavaScript in there. Like the CSS, we had the possibility of inserting or bringing in CSS by using the attribute star. So let's say we had heading 1, so we could use the attribute star to bring in CSS. So let me say CSS. You know what I mean by that. So basically we can write any CSS code here. The same thing, we could do this with JavaScript. You can have a tag, and then now instead of us to have one particular attribute, so kind of, let's say JavaScript script, and then have some value of JavaScript inside. No, we don't do that. So with JavaScript, we have a whole set of attributes that can be used in order to bring JavaScript along the tag. So to inline JavaScript, remember this was called inline CSS. So to inline JavaScript with our HTML tags, we have many ways of doing that. One of the easiest way, or the most commonly used way, is the on click. So on click. So what this means is that whenever there is a click on this element, HTML element, then we can get to execute some JavaScript in between here. So you have many of them, like mouse and mouse hover, right, or mouse out, or so many of them. So you have many of these, and these are called events. So you can bring in events, so you can use these events to now integrate JavaScript along our HTML tags. So we can inline the JavaScript with our HTML tags. So just like we had the inline CSS, we have inline JavaScript. The way we had embedded CSS, so like this case, so let me name this embedded. So this is the embedded options. Embedded. So these two options are embedded options. So anywhere on the page you can insert these two tags and then just write JavaScript. Anywhere you can insert these two tags and write CSS. So the same thing you can do with JavaScript, you do it with CSS. So as we can also remember that we had the option to bring in external CSS using the link tag. So we had the link, I use a different color now. We had the link tag, and then we use the href attribute to bring in CSS files. So cs file.css, right? So file.css, and that's how we brought external CSS. So the same thing we can do with JavaScript, but this time we still use the script, and then the attribute we assign to it is src, which is the source of the script, and then we can add other attributes like the type. So here we say file, and guess what, the file extension should be .js, so for JavaScript. So that's how we can bring in external CSS. So let's say, so we call it external. So these are external files. So the same thing we can do with JavaScript. So at this point you might be wondering, okay, what exactly do we write in JavaScript? What is it what can we do with that JavaScript? So this brings us to the next point. JavaScript is actually used for so many things. So I can tell you that one of the main uses of JavaScript we have when it comes to building websites is to manipulate HTML tags and also CSS styles. So what do I mean by that? So remember, when we were working on CSS, we said that we needed to write a target element. We needed to write a target element in CSS and then write a property. And then colon and then the value of the property. So if you remember that we targeted the element, then we manipulate that element, we style it. So the same thing, JavaScript has that capability of targeting HTML elements and then manipulating them as well. So not only, so that what that means is, so in JavaScript we could have a target, but in this time around we are not writing it the same way, because here we have to select the target. So we would rather say one get target, then target, use the target and do something, or do something on the target. So do something with the target or on the target. So basically that's how JavaScript manipulates the elements. It can also, and when it comes to getting the target, it might be an existing target or non-existing target. So in that case it can even create it. So instead of get only, we can also add create. So we can also add create. So it can create, it can get target elements, then do something with these target elements, and so on. And at the same time, JavaScript can also apply or inject, CSS on this element on the target, right? So, and it becomes complex. So in addition to all this, now JavaScript now has this computational capability, computation. So what I mean by the computational capability is that not only you will be able to manipulate all these elements, both HTML and CSS, but you can also add some intelligence. So for example, how efficiently do you manipulate a large number of data? How do you go and get some data? How do you send a request to a different server, and so on? JavaScript has these calculations like addition, multiplication, and all. It has that. We don't have that with CSS. We don't have that with HTML. So JavaScript has this computational capability. So let me add the operations here. Then modulo, see, subtraction, addition, multiplication, and etc. operations can be made using JavaScript. So now let's go through and then try to do these manipulations with JavaScript. Right? So I've created a project on our existing project. So I've created a project called the loader project, and then I want us to also do our form validation. So we'll see a little bit how we can use JavaScript in reality. So let's go back to our code, and this is what it looks like, the loader project. When I open the page, you see it loads. So all I did here was to add some HTML code in our header file, which is here. So I added a tag called loader, and inside that tag I added inside that div I added another div which contains an icon. So this is our first 4 icon. Then I just wrote the text loading. So the first 4 icon, I apply some CSS to it also on the loader. So if you go to our star, you can see I created a loader section where I gave it a background color like the background you are seeing right now. then I give it some full height so it covers the whole page, and I makes its position fixed. So this makes it float on our website. So it floats and it covers left and right, bottom, up, and so that makes it cover the whole page as you see there. So I use some flex alignment so to justify the element, that's the inner div. So I aligned it using flex so that it can be positioned at the middle of the page. And now I decided to animate that icon, the phosphor icon, which is the rotor, to rotate it. So, and that's the rotation function, every 3 seconds linearly forever. So, and that's what the rotation keyframes are doing. So this is what gives this icon to its animation, as you see here. So the goal of this project is that we would like it to show as it is, as far as the page, the underlying page, is not loaded. As soon as it loads, then we should be able to remove this loading page and show the website. So let's get started. So as I said, we could create our JavaScript file like we did. So let me go ahead, create a new file, then save it, and I will say script. So let me name it script.js. So once the script file is created, I would like to bring it in our website. So obviously it will be better if we insert it in our header because it will cover all the pages. So let me insert it here. So I'm going to say script type and so on, then source is script.js. So by doing that, we are bringing in our script file. So now how do we verify if this file is linked? And this will bring us to our first JavaScript code. Yes, so in general, when you are learning JavaScript, people will take you through something they call the developer, the console. Yes, the developer console, and it's actually seen when you open any browser. You go to you right click on anywhere on the screen, you do inspect, and once you do that, you see console here. So it shows console somewhere. So when you click on that console, then you can be able to write some JavaScript here. You see, so it is telling me there's an error. Whatever I wrote is not recognized as JavaScript. Now, before we go further, why do we even have this console here in the first place? What is it for? So, and why is it that we have to write JavaScript? We can write JavaScript here. So that console, the reason we have that console there is one of the answers to what JavaScript is. So it is a scripting language. So initially JavaScript was created as a small language to help manipulate small things on a website. So for example, you want to have an icon that can blink, or a link that can blink, or something like this. You could use JavaScript then in the 90s to do that. So it was then attached. So it was attached to the browser. So JavaScript was then built along the browser. So the JavaScript we are actually talking about here is the engine, like we spoke of the engine with PHP, right? The JavaScript we are talking about here is the engine. So you have the browser and you have your JavaScript engine along it. So this is to show you that it is actually inside the browser code, right? So whenever the browser, you send a file, so let's say you feed, so let's say this is HTML file. So whenever you feed that HTML file inside your browser by typing the address or the file name here .html, and if that file contains some JavaScript in there, if there is some little JS inside, then the browser will now forward that JS code to the JavaScript engine. So let me add engine here, and then the engine will be able to interpret it and bring back the result to the browser to display. So just like the PHP game, but the only difference here is that this engine is always along the browser. So that being said, it means there's something to interpret the JavaScript language along the browser, and that's why we have that console. That console is actually the interface for you to interact with that engine directly. So see it as this, and this is the console. So this is the console. So whatever you write on this console, let me make it like this, is talking to the JavaScript engine directly. And then this brings us to our first code. What can we write to that engine so that we'll know that it can understand us? Let me just write a number like that. Let me zoom it and increase here. So I'll just write a number. Oh, it recognizes the number, so it just brings me the number back. So let me do 6 plus 4. 6 plus 4. Oh, it recognizes that it's equals to 10. So remember that capability, that computational capability I spoke about, so it can do it. So what about 5 modulo 2? We have 1. That's great. What of 4 modulo 2? 0. Wow, it's an even number. Wonderful. So what else can we do? Remember, we learned something when we were talking about PHP, which is variables. JavaScript, being a programming language just like PHP, also can handle or also supports variables. And to create a variable in JavaScript, remember we used $sign in PHP. In JavaScript, we don't use the $sign. We rather use the keyword var or the keyword let or the keyword const, and then the variable name, So let me make it bold. This is too big. Then the variable name. Great. So an example of that is let name. Then we assign the same equals to, which is assign. This is to assign value. Assign. So assign in quote Jalil then you add some semicolon. It's a good habit to have, although it is not mandatory. So assign the name Jalil, so I use double quote, to the variable called name. So let's do that and see what it does. So let's say let name equals to, in quote, Jalil, semicolon, boom. It says undefined. Do not bother about that undefined. It has actually made its operation and there's no other operation to execute, so it's kind of saying, okay, I'm done, there's nothing else to do. But once we are done creating the variable, what else can we do with that variable? Maybe we can try to display it and see. Remember, when we're using PHP, we use the function echo or print. We use echo or print to bring the values. In JavaScript, the equivalent is the equivalent. Oh wow. So in JavaScript we could use console. Since we are on the console, we say console, then inside the console we want you to log. That's to display the name, so the variable name. So you might ask, so what if we are not on the console? What do we do? How do we display? For example, we work on our website. In general, we'll be working on websites, not and in the console. The console is used for testing purposes. So once we're on a website, how do we display something? And this is where things become really interesting and funny with JavaScript. So since the web page is going to be full of HTML tags, it means we could target an HTML tag and then replace its content with the content we want. Or we could say, so in that case, we could say target element we've gotten. So whatever target element we target, sorry, there's something missing. So target. So we could say the target element dot. There's a function called inner text, if I'm spelling it right. So inner text, and then whatever text you want to assign to it, you do it like that and you bring it in. Or you can also use the target dot inner HTML, and then you assign it the actual value you want to display. So this will target the actual HTML element and bring in the content. Or you could write directly target the actual document, so the HTML document you are working on. So you say the document dot write, the document dot write, and then in bracket this time around you write that thing you want to be written on the document. Great. So there are many ways of actually displaying things on JavaScript. We can also use the option of hide and show, hide or show, to make that happen. And this is the option we'll use in our example case. So in the project, you could see that we have our loader page, our loader screen already loaded and showing. So we have to hide it out. You get it? So in some cases, you have it hidden. You just have to display it back, and that's how it goes. So once we want to console something, want to display something, like we said, we use console log, then the name that will give us whatever is inside that container. So let's do that since we are on the console at this point. So console.log, the name we created as a variable, semicolon, enter, and then it brings us the name. Wonderful. So that is a one good way. The next thing I would like us to look at, since we've seen how to display something, how do we actually get that target element? How do we get it? So to get a targeted element, so get element, we also have many ways of doing that. We could use the element's name, and JavaScript has a function called get elements or elements. Get elements by tag name. Right, this sounds really huge, but it is true. By tag name, then you specify the name of that tag you are looking for. So let's say the tag is called strong, so we are going to get the tag strong. So we could use get element by tag name, elements by tag name. We could also use a function called get element, so with capital E, get element by, you see the difference here, there's no S, by tag ID. Remember the IDs we added as attributes for the to the HTML tags, and you also remember the names. So these are HTML attributes actually you need to declare, then you specify that ID here and it will get it. So we also have query selector, query selector, and this time around You specify if it is a class, you are selecting through a class. Okay, we also have get element by class name, so get element by class name and so on. So you add the dot if it is a class. If it is an ID, you add the hash and then you write the ID. So let's say ID, right? So, and some few other functions we can use to make that happen. So you also have the create element. Remember we said that not only it gets, but it can also create. So create element, and the element we are talking about here is actual HTML tag. So you need to specify an HTML tag name. So let's say it is a tag, so that's for a link, and then what you get is a link. So these are the ways you can have HTML elements. You can get the HTML elements, grab them from the document. So at this point, so many people will discuss about some concept called the DOM, right? But we will not go deep into that. We will not talk about that, because my concern is to show you a little bit of how these languages work together, right? So it's not to really teach you the exhaustive aspects of the language. And I believe when you learn by doing and you learn by the actual need, you learn better, you keep it better, right? You remember it forever. You don't learn too much, but you learn what is necessary for what you need, and as you continue to do, by the time you realize you have known so much. So that is the idea here. So once we know how to get a variable, we know how to create a variable, we know how to get an element. So let's get started and see what we want to do with our document. So if we go back to our code, we can now try that console log and see what we have here. So let me do console log in our script to prove that we are working. We have our file linked to our document before we can continue writing anything. So nothing seems to show up on the console. So nothing showed up. So I'm also expecting it to tell me there's an error. So I will expect it to give me an error. If there's no error, now next thing is let's view the source and see if our JavaScript file is indeed linked. So let's check it. We don't see it here. Don't see it here. What happened when we edited the header? Did we where did we make a mistake? So okay, we inserted it in the header, so it should be somewhere here. Yes. Okay, so it actually linked the JavaScript file well, so it shows the file well. So let me close this. I can also close this. We've spoke about that spinner already. So let's see what is going on. What if I try a string, constant string? Good, so it shows. So what was going on is that I am trying to display name. Whenever I write something like this and I don't add the double quote or single quote, JavaScript will automatically assume that there's a variable called name. So in our case, we did not declare that variable, so therefore it just keeps silent. So that's why I was saying I was expecting it to give me an error, so by telling me maybe undefined variable or so. So let's go ahead and create that variable like we did. So remember I said we could use let, or we could use var, or we could use const. So for now, do not bother about the keyword I used to declare the variable is okay. So Jalil, as time goes, you will now discover the differences. So you can see, so it recognizes it. So now we have our JavaScript file linked to our PHP file or our HTML document, and then we can also write some JavaScript. Then the browser can recognize it, and this is the proof. that it recognizes our JavaScript. So we can now stop using the console because we are now good programmers in JavaScript. So let's do some JavaScript. So what do we want to do? So we have the header which contains a loader. By default, when the site starts loading, that loader is also displayed, but we want to be able to know if the site is actually loaded properly. If the site is completely loaded, then we should remove that loader, right? If site is completely loaded, remove the loader. So is as site fully loaded? If yes, remove loader. Otherwise, do nothing. So that will keep the loader all over the place, loading all the time, right? So how do we check if the site has loaded? So JavaScript has one interesting concept, right? JavaScript has one interesting concept called events, and I mentioned it earlier on with the events that are being loaded, that are being checked when we inline JavaScript, right? So we can listen to these events. JavaScript gives us the chance to know these events, to actually capture these events, on specific elements. So we can capture events on specific element. Capture events on elements, right? Events on elements, that's HTML elements, of course. So that's HTML. So HTML elements. So how do we do that? Okay, simply, if you want to listen to an event on an element, as we said, you could go and add that attribute of the event. So for example, if we have the, like we said with the H tag, we could have the A tag, which is a link, and we could now add the event click. So if there's any click event on the element, do something, right? Do something. So this could be one way of listening to the event. The other way is programmatical. It's a bit programmatical, so that happens. You cannot do that on the by inlining the JavaScript like this. You can only do it when you are in a JavaScript file, like our actual JavaScript file. So what you do is, one, get the element. So first we get the element. Let me make it L. Then element, you say element dot. Please, this dot is not the same as this dot. In fact, let me write in full element. So in secondly, we do now that element we got dot add event listener. Add event listener, then in bracket the name of that event. So in our case, for example, this click event can be called here, right? So we say click. So when that event happens, what should happen? So at that moment, you add a function. So you just create a function. I know we have not mentioned a function, what a function is, but just see it as this. It's like a function in mathematics. So when you have a function of x, which is equals to ax plus b or plus something, so this function means whatever value we set for x here, we put it here. So that's a function. It does a particular computation, a given computation, maybe depending on some variables. This is a variable, so depending on some variables, the computation can give different results. So variable, so depending on the variable, the function can give a different result. So such kind of function, that's how we write it in JavaScript, PHP, and so on. So we write function. So in JavaScript, in this case, this function is called anonymous function, because normally to create a function you have to write the keyword function, right, like we do with F here. So function, then the name of the function, right? So let's say a function to add two numbers, add, and then in bracket the number one, the first number, then the second number that to be added, and then we open the curly brace, and then we close the curly brace, and in here we do our operation. So operation, we do our operation on the two numbers. So basically that's how functions are declared. So in this case we are using a function without giving it a name, and that is called an anonymous function. So you remember these two curly braces must also come in like that, and we will do our operation in between these curly braces. Okay, then we close the bracket. Remember, this bracket matches this bracket, this bracket matches this bracket, this curly brace matches this curly brace, then you can add your semicolon. So basically that's how you listen to an event. So when that event happens, this function will be called. So whatever operation you input in between the curly braces will be executed. So let me clear this. Let's add the semicolon. So this is what we are going to do. But the event we want to listen to is an event on the body elements, because if the body element is loaded, that's our HTML body element. So if you go to the index, this body element, once it is loaded, it means the site is loaded. So we would like to get that body element, right, and then be able to listen to an event on it, and that event is called load. So I'm going to put the code in here. So we are going to get the element. So we could say in our case we will use the query selector. So we'll use out of our functions to get elements, we'll use this query selector to make it easy. Or let me try with this get elements by tag name, and then you'll see what it looks like. So let body tag, so let me call it body tag, let body tag equals to document dot get elements by tag name, then we say body and semicolon. So to see if indeed we got that element, let's console log. Remember, so we want it to show on the console of the browser. We can send that information right from our code to the console. So we want the browser to emit that result on the console. And let's see what we have. Oh, we have an HTML collection, right? An HTML collection. So see it as like an array or a collection. See it like the sets are like I said. So it's a group of elements. So we got it. And in general, to manipulate such thing, you might convert it into an array. So, or let me do like this, and you access the element with the first index, and then you get the actual tag, which is body, and you have so many things you can do. Ignore all this, but this is to show you that we can actually get that element. So the next thing, rather what I will do is we'll use the document dot query selector, and then we specify just the HTML tag, and let's console log it and see what we have. We got the tag, right? So now we can manipulate this tag. Once we have it, we can manipulate it. So maybe this is an opportunity to show to you that we can do some few things on that tag before we move on to our logic. Let's say I have the tag, and I can now add an option called star. So this is like having the star attribute on an HTML tag. So star, then on that star, what star do I want to add? I will say background color. So you see how I'm writing that background color. There's no spaces or hyphen between the background and then the color. Then assign, what color do I want to assign to the background? Let's say blue. So let's preview and see what we have. Of course, we won't see because of our loader. The page is hidden. So let me just disable our loader temporarily and see what we have. Great. So you see, this is a good sign of what we said earlier, which is to use JavaScript to also manipulate CSS. So from JavaScript, we're able to insert CSS on our HTML tags or apply CSS styles on our HTML tag. So this is another beautiful thing. So I'll keep that too as a comment. Let me do this and do this as I'll comment it out, because this is not what we are interested in right now. So once we have the tag, we said as the site full loaded. So the first thing we do is, do we have the tag? So to check if the site is full loaded, so we bring it this logic here. So here we'll rather say get body tag. So as the site fully loaded, how do we do? So we say the body tag, add event listener, right? Add event listener, and the event listener we want to add is load, to check if the event has been emitted to show that okay, the page is loaded. Then we call our anonymous function, the function without name, and we do something. And now what do we do? So here we want to hide the loader div, right? We want to hide the loader div. So this is what we want to do. So it means here we also need to get the loader div. We need to get that div. If we check our header, that div has a class loader. So we could target it by saying let, right? So we use let on top. So let me just use them anyhow so that you see that I can use them without any issue. So let loader equals to, we assign to the variable loader the value of document dot get element. Let me use get query selector since we are working with it. And now since it is a class, I need to specify the dot and then the class name. So I'll get the element directly. So once we have the element, so if yes, remove element. So we go ahead here, otherwise nothing will happen. So if yes, loader, remember that CSS thing we did, that's what is going to help us again. So the loader dot start, let's add some CSS, and the display function which allows it to be displayed or not, then we'll do none. The display should be none. Great. So if we reload now, I expect it to remove it. So nothing happened, no error as well. So it is time to debug and look at what happened. So body tag dot add event listener. So it doesn't seem to be working, and it makes sense because I've been misleading you so far. This concerning the body tag, we are supposed to target. So we are not targeting the body tag, and I did not want to mention this aspect of things because I wanted us to just see some result before. So the thing is these elements, you see this kind of things, document dot, you see it's actually related to how the browser works. So basically we have the browser, right? And this is the browser's shell. Let me call it the browser shell. And this shell is called the actual windows, the browser's window, right? This is called the browser's window. Then in the browser's window, we load our website, and the website comes loaded as an HTML document. So right, then we have a document. So at this point, you can see that the document is a sub element of the window. So basically, to access these elements, so we use the accessor point. So like you saw, the dot you see me using is an accessor. It allows us to reach an element on top of another element. So by element dot add event listener, it means the event listener function, because it has bracket, is a function that is defined on the element, right? So the same thing, the window element, we have the document element defined on the window element. So you could say window dot document, but for brevity purposes we usually write document. And now the document having its own other sub element, now you can go ahead and say document dot some other things. So like get query selector, get element by ID, get element by target name, get elements by tag name, and so on. So that's the point. Now where I was making a mistake is to think that we are rather going to listen to the load on the body. No, we are rather going to listen to the load on the whole window, right? On the whole window. So that makes our work easier. So instead of us to get the body tag and do so, we can keep that just for this example purposes. Now we will listen to the window exactly. So we add the event of load. We listen to that event of load on the entire window and see what it does. So once the window loads, what happens? We now get our loader, and then we display it none. So we change its CSS style, and let's see what we have now. So let's see if you have some error. No error. So let me inspect the loader element and see. So we have it here. So let me give it some few seconds and see, assuming the site takes long to load. So that is obviously wrong. So let's check it again. So window dot event listener load function, then the function is called, then we get this guy. So let's see if the window is loaded. Let's say alert. So let me use another JavaScript function which is used to pop up something. So let's say okay, it should pop up something on the screen. You say yes, indeed that event happened. So it says okay. So it means the window actually loaded, the load event was fired, and this function was called. So what is happening here, and we are not getting this to work. So let's check this. Have we been able to actually grab that loader element? So to check if we have it, let's say console.log the loader to see if on the console we can see the element. We have the element, so we've gotten the element. So what happened? So it means in our styling there must be something wrong. So we said loader star dot display, we assign it to none. This sounds okay, but where is this semicolon coming from? We are not in the JavaScript file here, so this is a value, so we cannot have a CSS property called non semicolon. So if we actually look at that element and we check the display, so we are trying to say what I wrote there was display none, and then I do semicolon. So that semicolon I added it, but I added it as value rather, like this none with a semicolon. It won't work, it won't recognize that. So that semicolon has to go. So if you remove it now, place the semicolon right here and reload. Good. So automatically we can see that the loader element, as soon as the window loads, the loader element gets some CSS in line to it, and the CSS is display none, and then it makes it disappear. So if I reload, you see it goes so fast because the site loads very fast. So it pops up just quickly and then disappears. So I could create some delay to show you. So to create a delay, we use another JavaScript function. Called set timeout. So it means we will do something after a certain timeout. So after a certain time, let's do something. So what do we want to do? Here too, we call an anonymous function, and we do that thing we want to do. So we want to remove the loader after a certain period of time, and right after the function, you see that's the whole function's body. Right after it, we add a comma, and then we write the number of seconds we want to wait before the timeout. So it's like you give it a timer of 2 seconds. After the time of 2 seconds, it should execute everything that is inside. And let's see what happens. This time around, we should have some delay. Exactly. So you see, it delays it for some few seconds, then it executes. So this allows us to see our document loading. So congratulations. So through this small part of the tutorial, you've been able to see what JavaScript is, how we bring it into our HTML documents, how the similarities between JavaScript, CSS, PHP, functions, inlining, embedding, so on, external files, all these you've seen, declaring variables, getting elements, and then manipulating these elements using CSS, listening to events on those elements. You have no idea how much you have learned on JavaScript today. I hope you appreciate this. I hope you've learned indeed. So if you did, please kindly consider liking, leaving a comment, and sharing this video with your friends and families. And if you have any questions or any requests of tutorial or video, please leave it in the comment section. And you might tell me, oh, you have a debt, you owe us something. You owe me something because you promised that you are also going to handle the form validation. Yes, I think I'll leave that to you as an assignment, as a homework to conclude this whole thing. Let's discuss it. I will leave down and below the video the links where we could talk about all these things, our websites and so on, our Facebook and other social media pages. I'll leave all this down below the videos. Thank you. And I should say I really loved working with you on this series. See you in my next one. That was Zubuli.